Only true 90s kids remember these, so let's blow the dust off of them and put them back in the spotlight. I'm Tilly from What Culture Horror, and these are the 10 most underappreciated 90s horror movies. 10. Perfect Blue. Not your average psychological horror, Perfect Blue is from the fantastical world of anime, a Japanese animation that can depict its bending of reality and fiction far more horrifyingly than anything captured on screen due to its sometimes trippy medium. Whilst Perfect Blue has been well received worldwide since its release, it only seems to crop up in underground circles since it isn't a live action piece, which is a damn shame when you actually get to watching it. Honestly, it is absolutely brilliant. The plot follows Mima, who decides to leave her J-pop group for an acting career. She starts out on a gritty crime drama that allows her to move away from the innocent girl group image of her earlier life. But one particularly obsessed fan won't let her forget her past. Mima's life choices become increasingly difficult and her world begins to spiral out of control, leading to plenty of nasty scenarios stipulated by blood and plenty of discomfort. This is an exploitation movie like you've never seen before, unbridled from the constraints of reality and Western convention. 9. Hardware. The cyber horror of the 90s comes into full force with Richard Stanley's Hardware, the horror movie answer to what happens if the Terminator and Alien have a gross metal baby. Finding robot parts in the irradiated wastelands of planet Earth, a nomad decides to pick it up and bring it back, selling it onto a man and his artist girlfriend Jill to see what she can make with it. Now my darlings, here comes the lesson. Don't pick up future space robots you find in the dust when you don't know where they've been. This one turns out to be a fully armed military weapon that activates in Jill's apartment, hell-bent on killing her after repairing its own body, because of course they'd found the faulty deadly robot head with a self-repair mechanism. Hardware has a tone that veers all over the place admittedly, but its atmosphere is incredibly well constructed. What it lacks in its messiness, it more than makes up for in style, making it an underrated cult gem in the long run. 8. Kronos. Guillermo del Toro is one of the best creative forces in contemporary cinema. Pan's Labyrinth and The Orphanage have long since proved he's worth his weight in gold with his refined brand of fantastical horror, but his first feature film Kronos is often forgotten as one of the building blocks that got him there. It's critically acclaimed worldwide, beautifully shot and brilliantly conceptual. But where the hell has it been all our lives? Kronos is the story of a 400-year-old scarab discovered by an antiques dealer, Jesus, with a special functionality that allows it to attach to a wearer. Once latched on, it gives youth and life, but also an endless thirst for blood. With an interested millionaire after the very same scarab, Jesus is plunged into a world of mounting consequences, but hey, he looks really good while all this shit goes down around him. The film is a fantastic watch, combining an excellent story with Del Toro's deft and incredibly clever horror touch, and is one of the most arresting versions of a vampire legend you'll happen to come across. 7. Man Bites Dog. Described best as a Belgian mockumentary movie shot in black and white, and you'd be right to think that Man Bites Dog is far artsier than any horror movie has the right to be. That is, of course, until you learn that said documentary format devolves into the film crew actively participating in helping a serial killer get his kicks, filming their antics for fun in the process. Man Bites Dog is renowned as a good movie, but it still falls short of popular opinion compared to other films of its era. As a 90s horror, it's criminally overlooked by fans and the industry alike, an independent movie that mocked reality TV and its trappings before they even rose to their full popularity. Remembered in think pieces and throwback only, the film deserves much higher praise for its pin-sharp commentary, even if it is mostly just a deeply disturbing watch that you won't forget anytime soon. 6. The Addiction. Though he made his name with notorious video nasty The Driller Killer, indie director Abel Ferrara hasn't done much since then which can be classed as horror. This 1995 vampire movie is a notable exception. Lily Taylor, who was later squandered in the pretty awful remake of The Haunting, takes the lead as Kathleen, a shy New York college student whose life is transformed overnight by an encounter with a strange, threatening woman. A bite on the neck later, Kathleen goes from timid philosophy major to violent predator on the mean streets. It all sounds like a generic enough vampire movie, but in execution it's far removed from the norm. It's shot in black and white on a low budget, with a script laden with academic, literary and philosophical references, giving it a heavy art house sensibility. The Addiction may come off as a tad elitist and ostentatious for some tastes, but it is wonderfully atmospheric and a welcome anecdote to the flashier, trashier vampire movies we've seen before and since. 5. Cube. Unfairly overlooked in almost every aspect, Cube is the gritty little horror movie that takes place entirely in a giant cube, of course, in which a group of people are thrown in and left to attempt their escape from its many deadly traps. Unsure of how they got there and faced with mathematic puzzles almost impossible to comprehend, navigating the maze's many rooms of cheese wire chopping and fireball spewing contraptions is one thing, and discovering the real reason for their entrapment is entirely another. Cube arguably walked so that the Saw franchise could run, pitting one puzzle-like trap against a group of people that they have to keep their heads or lose them to free-flying machinery. Even though it's notably small in its execution, it only makes the film that more interesting, managing to pull off a concept much larger than the four walls it confines itself in. If you like a little mystery with your people being diced into finely chopped mincemeat, then Cube is for you. 4. Nightbreed. Containing perhaps one of the most terrifying villains to only ever appear in one horror movie, Nightbreed is born from the incredibly strange mind of Clive Barker, the man behind Hellraiser and who wrote scripts for Candyman and the Midnight Meat Train. If you needed any more convincing of his leanings to a dark dimension full of monsters and death, then he'd also put his name to video games like Undying and Jericho. Basically, man knows what he's doing. Nightbreed then is the story of an underground city of benevolent monstrous people, which our protagonist eventually discovers after being plagued by dreams of the place. However, a terrifying serial killer is hot on his trail, meaning the citizens of Midian must come together to take down the real force of evil. Like a good cheese and Henry Cavill, Nightbreed has only got better with age, and with loads of lovely monster sightings for fans of the genre, a genuinely scary central antagonist, and a visionary creepy world, it really does have something for everyone. 3. Dust Devil. One of the great tragedies of 1990s cinema, particularly for horror fans, was the brief rise and spectacular fall of writer-director Richard Stanley. After getting off to a very promising start, the South African filmmaker crashed and burned big time on 1996's infamous The Island of Dr. Moreau. Before this, however, Stanley was responsible for two of the most unique and striking genre films of the decade, of which 1992's Dust Devil was the second. Drawing on folktales from the director's homeland, the film centres on an enigmatic hitchhiker who preys on vulnerable women driving through the desert. We know straight away this guy's bad news, following an eye-opening early scene in which he breaks a woman's neck while having sex with her. But while he may seem your standard serial killer, there may be something more otherworldly about him. Dust Devil blends relatively standard slasher motifs with surreal imagery and overtones of occultism. The result is a hypnotic, spellbinding movie of far greater emotional resonance than your average serial killer flick. It also helps that Stanley makes the absolute most of the awe-inspiring landscapes of Namibia, where the movie was shot on location. 2. Cemetery Man. Life is pretty hard when you're Francesco Della Morte, who lives on the edge of a cemetery doing his duties as a caretaker for those buried in Buffalora, even when the residents are less than kind to him. Life's even harder for the dead though, since they keep reanimating only to get beaten back into submission by the end of Della Morte's spade as he attempts to keep the town clear of a zombie upheaval. When Francesco falls in love with a woman whilst all these bodies are hopping up out of the ground, however, everything turns on its head. Cemetery Man is a neat little horror that isn't afraid to be extra weird, with undead lovers and strange visual metaphors running as wild as death does in the small Italian town. Flying mostly under the radar since its release, if you were a fan of the zombie renaissance we suffered through recently, then this oddball movie will slot nicely into your collection. And number 1. In the Mouth of Madness. John Carpenter is obviously renowned for his work on The Thing and Halloween, with a whole host of movies before and after that cemented his role as a legend of the horror genre. One that often slips by unsuspecting fans, however, is In the Mouth of Madness, an homage to Lovecraft in its execution as all sorts of monstrous hell breaks loose on our earthly plane. When horror writer Sutter Kane mysteriously vanishes, an insurance investigator attempts to find clues in Kane's texts, ending up in a strange town that bears an eerie resemblance to the recurring setting of the author's work. Stuck somewhere between reality and Kane's imagination, the film is full of supernatural surprises that reveal the pen to be far mightier than the sword, especially in the hands of such a twisted individual as Kane. Drawing on inspiration from the ongoing legacy of Stephen King, too, In the Mouth of Madness is a love letter to the spooky guys that built the written foundations of the horror movies we know and love today. And that's our list. Any 90s horror gems we didn't mention? Let us know down in the comments below. If you like this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and check out our other videos for more creepy content. I've been Tilly, and this has been What Culture. Thank you so much for watching, and make sure to look after yourselves and your loved ones. See you all soon.